Hello, welcome to an extra episode of Saints Row 4. I'm just gonna use this computer here. Text adventures, let's try that. My youth. The story begins in the remote village of Zinshire, a hamlet just west of Zinport, in the country of Zinland on a planet known only as Zin. By nature, the Zin people are an uncultured and slow-witted lot, easily entertained by such diversions as arm wrestling, counting the spots on one's back. People of Zinshire are most especially for this description, so I'm sure you can already foresee the struggles I endured in life. First, those struggles were my parents. My father, son of a butcher, was a small man with a fierce temper. Of all things I learned from my father, the one thing that sticks to me most has to be proper way to butcher a Zin pig. Most assuredly not. My father's butchering technique was deplorable. Thirst for knowledge? Not even paying attention. My father was as dim as the second sun the 14th of Sinuary. Lust for power. My father, though as thick as the back hair on a newly born Zinfin, did indeed have an unquenchable hunger for control. While he never managed to rise higher than the head of a simple village council, he nonetheless carried the dream. My mother, on the other hand, a gifted seamstress who married far below her station, wanted me to enjoy the things so many others could not. I remember clearly on the eve of my 13th birthday, her taking me to computer randomly decided to minimize the game. Oh well. Traveling is inspired companies laid down from antique. Please, if a traveling company is renowned would step foot in the hovel such as Zincar's pastry shop. I only think a place such as Zincar would not support a fine bakery, and you would be right if it closed after a year, but it was not for a lack on trying on my mother's part. She wished for her only child to have an appreciation for the finer offerings of life, and she began managing with Zincar's delectable pastries. Oh, I was right. Not only did I sample the goods of Zincar's shop, but I spent the summer there sweeping the floor, tending the counter, and even learning a bit of the culinary arts. I took to baking with zeal. Clients enjoyed my baked goods, and I became known through Zinshire for my, ganache-drenched eclairs. While my eclairs were among the best ever created, I was actually known for something else. Fresh fruit tarts? At last, the climate of Zinshire is not conducive to the growing of fruit. Cream puffs. I can still feel layers of crisp dough flaking gently on my tongue awash in a smooth release of sumptuous cream. Even though Zincar's endeavors was not long for this world, I continued to sell my renowned cream puffs door to door. Business which thrived, I must say, doing well enough to supplement my admission to the most prestigious private school in Zinland. But that, my friend, is another day. The written word. I had acquired the money to attend the finest school in Zinland, but that was just the beginning. While I would love to say Zinkov Preparatory Academy embraced me with open arms, the truth of the matter is I was not the finest student. In order to gain admission, I had to endure rigorous physical and academic testing before they would grant me access to the legendary halls of learning. As is usual for admission to a school of such acclaim, the first of these tests was killing my own parents. My word, what sort of barbaric school did you attend? Trying out for a sport? While participating in competitive sports is encouraged and a good source of income from any institution of higher learning, testing for such a thing was not required. A scholastic aptitude exam. As was my mother's wish, Zinkov Prep was an institution that prided itself in its scholastic offerings. To that end, it only accepted candidates that displayed academic prowess and further promise. So it was that I endured many weeks of standardized testing and training prior to my entrance examination. I am proud to say I took to the studies well and managed to bring up my scores across the board. Still, there was one subject above all others that I had a particular affinity for. As you may have already guessed, that subject was art history. Though it pains me to admit such faults, art history was my weakest subject. The life of a museum curator, how I shall never know you. I'm pretty sure it's science or mathematics, probably science, so I'll just try that first. Literature. The written word. I had, like most, learned to read while in utero, but that was all very dry text, such as manuals and design documents. It wasn't until this far more serious pursuit into academia that I came to love the classics. Oh, it was. Well, that explains why he was quoting Macbeth and all that. How surprised was I that some of the finest literature in the universe came from a tiny watery planet more than 10 million light years away. Well, it would be some time until I visited that seemingly unremarkable way station I had fallen in love with its artistic offerings already. One author's work in particular captured my imagination. Can you just describe responsible? Dr. Seuss. Good doctors among the finest in literature, there is no doubting that, but I did not get lost amongst his colorful characters and impeccable rhyming structure as much others. Probably Jane Austen, because that's how it ended. Charles Dickens? I can't abide any author who dares suggest frugality and the demand for proper work ethic are grounds for otherworldly intervention. I don't care if the workers' boys on crutches. That man had a business to run. No, absolutely not. Mark Twain? If I wanted to read about deceitful children, time-traveling charlatans, and overburdened bullfrogs, I'd well suppose Twain could be the one. But no. Yeah, Jane Austen. Jane, sweet, sweet Jane, how like my mother's dream you are. Even now, these years later, just the thought of Emma, Eleanor, and Elizabeth's exploits and romantic missteps bring a lump to my throat. Oh, the intoxicating back and forth between Miss Bennet and Mr. Darcy. How I could read those lines toward infinity. It was my celebrated essay on Jane Austen's body of work that caught the attention of the Zinkov Admissions Board, who not only allowed me to enter into their fine institution, but secure my later position as head of the English Language Appreciators Society. Thus it was my love of literature cemented in access to Zinkov Proprietary Academy assured. Which is where I met the teacher who would help me find my life's true purpose, though that is another tale. Zinkov Prep. A clear recall the first tentative steps into Zinkov Preparatory Academy. Preparatory Academy. I was a lad from the countryside coming into the big city, eyes wide and mind eager. I had never seen a building so large or so many finely dressed young people yearning for knowledge. It was the first time in my life I ever felt I was somewhere I truly belonged. Of course, not all the Zinlings there were courteous, studious-minded folk. Predictably, it wasn't long before I crossed the path of a brutish young man named Zinfax, we instantly loathed each other. It was obvious from the start that Zinfax took umbrage with my... I'll just go for the right one that I can guess. Lower class upbringing. Typical, no? I was now entering the proud and prejudice-filled society I had read about so eagerly just a few months prior. While Zinfax was a bore and a constant thorn in my side, I found solace in my studies. Literature had engaged me earlier on, but the offerings of Zinkov Prep allowed me to expand into even higher-minded subjects such as intergalactic warfare and how to exploit diplomacy for personal gain. What a world of knowledge there was to explore! More than any of the Zinkov faculty, Professor Zinlau informed my later days. I remember clearly it was just 2 weeks into my first year when Zinlau pulled me aside after class and said to me, "Zinyak, you are a natural-born leader. Zinyak, these people are all your inferiors. Zinyak, never let anything or anyone else stop you from pursuing a dream." Yeah. While Zinlau must have been well aware of that, as a professor seeking tenure, he was obligated to maintain a facade of impartiality, I'm sure. Zinyak, you're a natural-born leader. Well, yes, that's evident, but... Has anyone ever told you that before? What a remarkable thing to say to a formative lad. He was right. I, as the poor son of an ignorant butcher, had made it to the finest university on the planet. I wasn't pursuing my dreams. I was living one. Those words kept me strong through 4 years of demanding study, kept my mind clear from physical distraction, and are to thank for my graduating with honors from Zinkov Preparatory, a first for anyone from the hamlet of Zinshire. Upon receiving my diploma, I knew exactly what I must do. Kill Zinfax and enter military service. Order of operation, don't you know? Yes, I admit I let my personal dislike for that heinous bully overcome me, and I snapped Zinfax's neck like an old bark flaking off a dying oak. My first time at Zinkov Preparatory, now at an end, entered yet another phase of my life, one that would take me to a great many exotic locations and allow me to realize, finally, my true potential. Thus ends my years as a plucky child. Next we meet, I shall regale you with the tale of Zinyak, the young man. Military, the early years. After my time at Zinkov Preparatory Academy, I did what all young people on Zin must do, entered the military. Prior to my days at Zinkov, I admit I did not look forward to this rite of passage, but after I relished the idea of honing myself into the specimen I would later become. Basic training was, as it is designed to be, a particular sort of hell. I don't know what the rules are where you came from, reader, but military training for the Zin army consists of a grueling 8-week course that pushes recruits to their breaking point. Some did not survive the training and were sent off to work in the mines or forced to join the Zin National Orchestra, famous across 7 galaxies, for how hideous their music is, in order to endure the training I often relied upon. No. My iron will and drive to do whatever I must to excel. Relied is perhaps a bit strong. I certainly possessed an iron will, but will have relied on it? A manufactured hatred of the enemy. A wise man once said, "Without a target we are all just bullets in the wind." I wrote that in my journal last week, and it's true. Whenever you find yourself facing a seemingly insurmountable challenge, it helps to envision all the turncoats, opportunists, and megalomaniacs that are just waiting for you to fall, so they can swoop down and pick the meat from your bones. With the furnace of pure hatred burning inside me, nothing would stop me from overtaking any challenge set before me. It was evident in later days of my training that I was going to excel at conquering worlds. It was evident even then that I had conqueror's blood coursing through my veins. I took to every task with gusto, never accepting anything but the best for myself and all those around me. I had vision, I had drive, I had everything needed to seize the universe by the nebulas and make it mine. After basic, I entered service and was sent to the front line of the great war that was brewing on the planet Bedard. There, I led the charge against the great Bedardian commander, Franz Scott, using my innately keen insight to surprise Franz Scott by playing selections from the Zin National Orchestra at high volume. Nobody deserves that. Sneaking into his basement with the cover of darkness. While it may sound like a simple tactic, you should be aware that the average day on planet Bedard lasts an excruciating long time. But I and my charge held our position till a perfect moment to strike. We infiltrated Franz Scott's compound, trampled his men under our mighty boots, and shattered the door to his bedchamber, wherein I pounced upon the fool and smothered him with his own pillow. Even now, looking back, I can't help but smile. From there I led the charge after numerous enemies of the Zin Empire. Soon the entire Bedardian army fell before us, and we had yet another notch on our already impressive carved belts. Rise to power. Magnificent victory under my belt, my military superiors saw fit to bestow upon me a meritorious service in the glory of the Almighty Zin, commendation, and my first of many promotions. Recognition breeds contempt, though, and I made many enemies throughout my military career, perhaps none more scathing and more heartbreaking than Kin Fob, the Brutus to my Caesar. Zinfob served me well against the Bedardian army, but his pride got the best of him when he questioned my authority in front of the troops. No. Question my readiness to command? Citing in my unquenchable bloodlust, cold and calculating demeanor, lack of conscience, all the things that were held in such high regard during training, Zinfob dared to suggest that I was unfit for high-level command. I was brought before my superiors in a mock tribunal held simply to satiate Zinfob's whim. I assure you, when I was called upon to defend myself against these allegations, complying with the tenets of the charade, I took my seat as defended. As clear as the stretched cries of a fallen foe, the charges were leveled against me. Against each one I remained silent? No. Yes, very droll. I stayed quiet for no one. Explain myself in a clear, concise manner. Admittedly, I may have used some coarse language as emphasis to underline my points, but I conducted myself as one ought during any legal proceeding. After careful explaining myself to the council, they saw my point of view and dismissed Zinfob's case against me. Afterwards, I hunted my accuser down and killed him where he stood. That nastiness behind me, I not only continued to fulfill my role within the Zin army, but I excelled at it. After many more successful terrestrial campaigns against our foes, the officials saw fit to give me my own ship. Indeed, no longer was I a simple passenger on our interplanetary death vessels. I now had my hand firm upon the rudder, metaphorically speaking, of course. Interplanetary death vessels are steered by complicated navigational systems. Now a celebrated member of the Zin army with the seasoned crew of my command, I headed out toward adventure through a gamma. Blew up planet Zin and never looked back. Zin may not be the most culturally celestial body, but still my home. Headed out toward adventure. It was time to leave terra firma behind me and venture toward the stars. After forcibly convincing my crew to celebrate my newly appointed position with a soiree in my honor, we lifted anchor and spread out our sails again. again metaphorically speaking, towards destinations just ripe for the picking, and that, dear reader, is where my tale gets more exciting. Ad astra per aspera. Like a siren calling ships to the rocks, the velvety expanse of space has been a harsh mistress to many. To me, the unconquered reaches were a challenge I not only accepted but yearned for. So many poor souls, blithely unaware of how mediocre their existence were without a firm, hard hand to guide them toward greatness. Oh, how I longed to be that hand. I am not a soul easily satisfied, so I knew my dream destination must be a planet that could challenge not the collective might of the Sin army, but my tactical instinct. Terrestrial victories I had accumulated in my prior campaigns often failed to adequately test my keen tactical instinct. The maneuvers and strategies employed by so many of my foes were woefully pedestrian on their best days. I knew somewhere in the celestial womb a leader must exist who could properly challenge me. How fortunate I was that I only had to eradicate 12 civilizations before coming toe-to-toe with the talented and well-trained forces of the Zhejiang theocracy. Despite what you may have heard about the people of Zhejiang Quadrant, I assure you they were ahead of the rest in their martial prowess. Perhaps most impressively, Zhejiang had mastered biomechanical fighting mechanics. Despite centuries of effort dedicated to the pursuit, all their attempts at melding flesh and technology resulted in nothing greater than the automated harvesting machines. Planetary shield technology. By harnessing the geothermal energy of Zhejiang's molten core, the theocracy were able to power a Dyson sphere-like shield around their entire planet. It sparkled in the sun like a coarse line of stars purating in the sheerest glimmer of light. The way it shattered in the wake of our neutronic lasers was simply breathtaking. Upon our arrival on their planet's surface, the head of the theocracy, an imposing figure named Bishop Quirkzug, pleaded for not only his own life but the lives of his people. Always a fair man, I agreed to meet him on a level field of battle, mano a mano. True gentleman, I even let him select a contest. Much to my surprise, he chose a board game? As part of the Tiara doctrine, the Jang did not believe. A duel of swords. Arm wrestling? And I thought I had left such an uncultured diversions back on Zin. I learned then that this so-called sport had reached a far wider audience than I had hoped. Yes, Zerquag chose to challenge me at arm wrestling. How, for society so advanced technology, though, thought I, could they be so taken for the grasping hands and pushing? Little did I know that the cephalopodian anatomy of the Zhejiang combined with a curved surface that passes tables allowed them great leverage at the sport. Oh ho, how clever Quirkzug was, luring me into a trap that played upon my own prejudices. Well done indeed. As it turns out, the winner of that match was the draw, Quirkzug. Yes, Quirkzug used an anatomical advantage to best me at that infantile test of strength. After shooting him through his enormous eyes, I congratulated his corpse on a job well done. Giving the Zhejiang people no quarter, we made hasty work of their pathetic planet, and to this day I keep Quirkzug's desiccated tongue in my pocket. I rub it for luck. Though I wasn't aware of it prior, the Zhejiang homeworld was a rich source of gemstones and minerals in rare reserve on other planets. With resources in high demand at our disposal, I was able to fund many more conquests throughout the richness of space. Fascinating story that I'll tell you soon. Yep, the Great Zin expansion. As you indubitably are already aware, the Great Zhejiang victory was just the beginning of my storied career in the Zin army. I still had numerous conquests awaiting me, including my first venture out toward a place native scholars once called Via Lactea. Possessing astute foresight as I do, coupled with my all-times all-consuming need for control, I knew that before I set out to do anything I must acquire more ships. No, not to be immodest, but my fleet was already quite impressive, thank you. Find a second in command. Even I cannot be everywhere at once. I knew in order to keep my crew appropriately subordinate while still being able to have some essential me time, that I had to have someone I could trust implicitly to oversee the orders I gave, someone who could be my eyes and ears and also tend to my every whim without question. I was a plucky young soldier named Zinjai, who stood who stood cranial crown and shoulders above the rest. I knew he would be. I knew he would be make a. I knew he would be make a fine lieutenant, but as is customary to prove one's successor worthy, I first administered ritual beatings. Those were already part of their daily routine. I saw no need to beat a dead horse. Do you see what I did there? I made a pun. It was a very good one, too. A quiz to determine his understanding. Scholastic aptitude test. Oh, call it back. Yes, quite humorous of you. A quiz to determine his understanding of basic etiquette. I was not about to appoint someone as my military surrogate and a manservant who was unable to appreciate propriety and tradition. I knew that if anyone were to even attempt to fill my proverbial boots, that they had to be able to do so in any conceivable situation. So it was I constructed a battery of examinations designed to test etiquette across all manner of occasions. They really were brilliant, even if I do say so myself. I am proud to state that Xinjai passed every test in spectacular fashion, though we did almost have an incident when, since it's a bride during examination, on proper cross-cultural greetings, a rabid Zinpig got loose upon a ship during a rousing debate on intergalactic politicking, or attacked prior to the dinner course on a fine meal, in what was a regrettable lapse of judgment on the part of famed Boonian tactician Ariel the Furious. The Boon Armada attacked us in mid-space during the most important segment of Xinjai's testing. After destroying the Boon fleet ship and flaying all the crew members, I beheaded Ariel the Furious with a bread knife and threw his remains into the onboard incinerator. Xinjai and I then went on to enjoy a most lovely meal full of fresh Boon steaks and delightful conversation. His testing over, I formally named Xinjai as my lieutenant servant, and we continued our trek into deep space. Per my grand plan, I set about culling the universe of its weakest cultures first, starting with the Zotz-Bray Alliance. And even neophyte Xin should know the great linguistic misunderstanding carved wide political chasm that separated the Goats-Bray Alliance millennia ago. What do they teach in schools these days? No. The Kjort Nerfer tribes of Central Alspazia. The Kjort tribes have been blighted in Central Alspazia since time immemorial. Really, I was doing everyone a favor by raising those heathens to the ground. But did the unified nation of Central Alspazia show me any gratitude at all? Of course not. Monsters they crawled. Psychopath. Nothing short of planet-wide genocide was going to shut them up, which thankfully it did. From there I continued on my path, conquering every planet that stood in my path. Yet despite the sense of unparalleled accomplishment, I felt something was lacking. It was not until later that I would stumble upon my greatest achievement, my defining moment. My defining moment. Yes, I held the keys to the universe in my grasp, yet something was missing. These victories, numerous though they were, felt hollow. I found myself wanting more. Needing more. What could I possibly be missing? I had everything. Civilizations trembled when I announced my presence. My own army lived in fear of my wrath. What could I possibly be lacking? Then, like an evolutionary link crawling from the depths of a primordial soup, it hit me. I had taken so many lives. For what purpose? Conquering was not enough. I needed to test them, to challenge them, to collect them. It was then I decided to build the simulation. I could not trust those who felt before my might to roam around unsupervised in the real world, but a virtual one, that was another matter entirely. It came to me as a vision, a vast interconnected web of simulated worlds designed not only to contain the best and brightest in the universe, but to break their wills and make them subservient to me, Zinyak, galactic overlord and head emperor supreme of the Zin Empire. Oh, did I forget to mention I killed my predecessor and claimed his throne for my own? My apologies for the oversight. I tasked Xinjai with overseeing the simulation's construction. We would hold the physical bodies of my fallen foes in a nutrient-rich suspension designed to accommodate even the most peculiar metabolisms. Meanwhile, their minds would go on in a world of my own creation based on each subject's deepest fear. Yes, everybody aside from your humble narrator is afraid of something. Familial loss, a straying loved one, anonymity, spiders, and by subjugating each victim to their deepest fear, to replay their most dreaded moment over and over again until their psyche shatters and their mind becomes malleable putty in my eager fingers. I could control them. I could control everyone. Once the simulation was completed, all I needed to do was start hooking up victims. I was excited too, but we mustn't be rash. Find a test subject? And who better test simulation upon than my right-hand man? Zinjai was not eager to take in this simulation, but after a brief, thorough, intensely painful discussion, he saw the benefits of the architect being the first to walk into his own building. For hours I heard Zinjai's screams echo throughout the ship like the mellifluous song of a child in mourning, and I knew then that the simulation was my raison d'etre. It would set the standard for forward-thinking empires throughout the universe, and if any should ever match its brilliance, I would crush them and claim their design for my own. After extracting Zinjai from his personal nightmare, he gave his most wholehearted approval. When asked what his version of hell was, he said, "A life with only me." To be honest, Zinjai didn't tell me what his deepest fear was, and I didn't press the matter, for I had other things to do. With the simulation as my crown jewel, I took to universal conquering with renewed zeal. I found a pleasure in forced subjugation of sentient life forms I never thought I'd have again. My enemies didn't simply fall by my sword. Their wills were snapped like the bones of a mostly subordinate. I no longer had only the echo of their dying words to remember them by, but I had a whole world of twisted imagery and deep-rooted doubts and phobias. Oh joy, oh cascading bliss. And I could visit them whenever I wanted. I had complete control. I held their brittle consciousnesses in my hand, and I could play with them like flicking seeds into the wind. The simulation was not perfect. Nothing is. Even the masterwork, Venus de Milo, is short a couple of appendages. But it was mine, and it was beautiful. For those who tested my patience by attempting escape, I had protocols in place. When needed, I intervened personally, though it was rarely necessary. Many of the subjects thought they were exceptions to the simulation's rules, but I put every one of them summarily back into place. So it was I went about collecting the exemplary specimens from cultures throughout the entirety of the known world, with one exception, a certain destination whose exploration I wished to savor, a place whose artistic contributions had first set me upon my path. There was something there I especially wished to meet. There was someone there I especially wished to meet, and with the time-bending capability of the mothership, I could. But also I knew any planet capable of literary work of that caliber must also breed warriors unlike any other. I was excited, readers. Every part of my essence shivered with anticipation. With the might of the Sin Empire behind me, I set out toward the far corner of the universe, toward a new galaxy, to conquer a planet I had only enjoyed through its culture, Earth. And there's all the text adventures. Text adventures. That's the end of this extra episode. Next one, audio logs. Oh god, my throat hurts. Normally I don't talk much, but hopefully I was able to get through this. So, hope you'll join me for another episode. Take care.